Loops. In the earlier video on arrays, we talked about being able to create lists of data that make it easier to retrieve the items that we want. However, up until this point, we've always known how many items we have in the array, so we've only been able to retrieve items from our array when we know what position it was in the list. In this video, we'll introduce you to some more statements that will give you a lot more power and flexibility within your scripts. So again, we'll use the example of our shopping list that we had in the last video. Okay, well in this script we've declared two variables. The first up here is our shopping list and the second is simply a string which we'll use in a moment. On the next line, we've created our array and we've seen that before. Okay, now here is where we've created our loop. You see, in the previous videos, if we wanted to pull a value out of our array, we'd have to specify the position of the item in the array, for example, position 1, which is milk. But if we don't know the position of milk in our array, or how many items we have in the whole array, it makes it hard for us to find what we're looking for. So here we've created a for each loop. Now a for each loop lets you perform an action on an object, then perform the same action on a different object, and keep doing this until there are no more objects. So what our loop here will do is grab each item from our shopping array and place whatever value it finds in our str string here. Then we'll display a message box showing us whatever we've just grabbed from our array. Now finally at the bottom here we have the next keyword, which returns us back up here to the for each line, where this line will run again against the next item in our array, and it's going to continue looping back to this line of code here until there are no more items in our array. So what we'd expect to see here is a message box popping up and showing us bread, and then another one showing us milk, and then apples, and then so on until we've looped over every single item in the array. Now when there's no more items in the array, since we don't have any more instructions in our script here, the script will simply exit. Okay, so let's go and run our script. We'll go to our command prompt and we'll run for each.vbs and we'll hit enter. And we'll get our pop-up message which shows us the contents of the str string, and that of course is the first item in our array, which is bread. So we'll click on OK and our script will loop back and get the second item in our array, which is milk. Okay, it's going to get the third item now, which is apples, and so on until it's finished. Okay, so you've just seen how easy it is to use the for each method for enumerating or listing every single item in an array. Now I will grant you that this isn't a particularly useful example. We'll get to showing you a little more realistic use of the for each next loop in a moment. Now there are four basic constructs you can use to loop over a list of items. We have the for each next loop, we have the for next loop, do while, and do until. So we'll go and take a look at how and why you'd use each of them. We've already seen the for each next loop in action. So we'll move on and we'll look at the next item in the list, the for next loop. The first thing you'll need to do when using the for next loop is to define a variable that'll keep track of the loop's execution. Or in other words, it'll count how many times we've ran over our loop. So here at the top, we've declared a variable which I've simply called myLoop. You'll also need to define a starting and ending value for the loop to execute. So if you want your loop to start at the number 1 and loop 20 times, you'll define a starting value of 1 and an ending value of 20 like you see here. Now rather than using the message box function like we have in previous videos, I don't really want to be clicking OK 20 times for each cycle of our loop. So here I've used VBScript.echo statements to write out the results of our script to the command prompt. And you can see that we're simply passing the variable myLoop to it. Now finally we'll use the next statement to go back over the loop until we reach the end number, which of course is 20. So what's going to happen here is that our loop will start at the number 1, and that will be returned back to us at our command prompt. When the loop completes, we'll go back to the for line here, and the value in myLoop will now be 2. Now this cycle will repeat, and the value in our variable myLoop will be incremented by 1 each time until our ending value of 20 is then reached. Now at this point, the loop is complete, and since we have no more code, the script will simply end. So if we go to our command prompt and we'll run our script here. Okay, as you can see, we have the numbers 1 through to 20 written out to our command window as we expected. Now as an aside, if you do want to be able to count by a number other than 1 like we did here, if we go back to our script, then after our 1 through to 20, we can add in the step function followed by another number. In this case I've used 2. So I'm just going to go and save this, and we'll go back to our script and we'll rerun it. Now this time when our script runs, you can see here that the increment is now 2. Alright, well the next type of loop we have is the do-while loop. Now a do-while loop is designed to continue looping while a condition is true. Okay, in this example here at the top, we've declared a variable, which I've just called again my loop. Next, we've produced our do loop, and on the next line, we're using an input box where we'll ask a user to enter in a number, and as you can see here, we've put some text in there to ask the user to enter in the number 3 to continue looping. This number will then be assigned to our my loop variable. Now on the final line, we'll loop until, or in other words, we'll go back up to our do statement until such time as the user enters in a number other than the number 3. Now at that point our loop will exit, but only then. Entering the number 3 will force our script to continue looping. Alright, so let's run our script. And as you can see, we've just been given an input box, and you can see here we've been asked to enter in the number 3 to continue looping. So I'm going to enter in the number 3 and we'll click on OK. And as you can see, we're back at our input box. So if we enter 3 in again and click OK, you can see here that we're still back at our input box as we're still inside our do loop. Now if we enter in a different number, any other number than 3, we'll click OK again. And there you can see our loop exits as we predicted. So that's a do-while loop. And whilst a do-while loop is designed to continue looping while a condition is true, a do-until loop will continue looping until a specific condition occurs or a condition becomes true. Now a good example of where a do-until loop is useful would be when you want to monitor disk space or monitor a system for a specific occurrence, or searching text until you find a specific word, phrase, or line. Okay, we'll go back to our scripting editor, and I have a do-until loop here. Alright, well in this example, again at the top, we've declared a variable, which I've again called my loop. Next, we've produced our do loop here, and on the next line, again we're using an input box where we'll ask the user to enter in a number between 1 and 5. Now this number will also be assigned to our my loop variable. Now on the final line, we'll loop until, or in other words, we'll go back up to our do statement until such time as the user enters in the number 3. At that point, our loop will exit, but only then, because entering in the number 3 will cause our statement to become true. Any other number will force our script to loop again. Alright, so let's go and run our script. We'll run our do until, and as we expected, we've got our input box here, so I'm going to enter in the number 1. We'll click OK, and we're back at our input box. So our loop has successfully looped back over to our do statement. Now we'll enter in 2, and we'll click OK, and again we're still in the do until loop. But if we enter in 3, our loop exits as we predicted. Now before we go and wrap up this video on loops, I want to talk to you about something that you will want to avoid, and that's infinite loops. An infinite loop is exactly as it sounds. It's a loop that never ends. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my scripting editor, and I do happen to have another script here called infinite. Now in this example here, I've again declared our variable, which we've called my loop. Next we've created our loop, and we've defined a do until loop, so we'll loop until our variable my loop contains the value of 3. But on the next line, we've set the my loop variable to 4. Obviously when our loop executes, it'll never equal 3 since we've forced the value to be 4. So this is going to loop over and over again, and it's going to continually get the same result. Now this condition will continually occur, and as such the loop will never exit unless we manually break the script. So we can prove that. We could just come down to our command prompt here and we'll run our script. And as you can see, it doesn't appear that anything's happening, but obviously in the background our script is continually cycling over, trying to get the value of 3. And of course this script will never exit. So manually exiting our script is the only way to stop it. So that's an example of an infinite loop, which is obviously something you're going to be wanting to avoid when you write your scripts. Okay, in this video we've discussed loops and seen how they can make your script smarter. We've looked at the for each next loop, which lets you perform an action on an object and then perform the same action on a different object and keep on doing this until there's no more objects. The for next loop lets you specify how many times you want to execute a loop. Then we looked at the do while loop, which will continue looping while a condition is true. And finally we talked about the do until loop, which will continue looping until a specific condition occurs or a condition becomes true. Now at this stage, if you've been listening attentively, you'll have a good understanding of the basics of VB scripting. Now in the second half of these videos, we're going to move on to some more real-world examples and we'll start using objects in our scripts.